So welcome to talk sponsored by the Institute for Energy Studies and Western Washington University. You folks are looking like there we go.
Error? Oh, no, good.
And I saw an error there for a minute. Okay, sorry about that. Western Washington University and the Alumni Foundation, the Institute for Energy Studies are happy to have you here in this room, and those of you online who are joining us for this afternoon's talk as part of our speaker series for the Institute for Energy Studies. Our speaker today is Dr. Jim Conca, who has been working on nuclear energy issues and energy issues more broadly for the past 40 years or so, including on President Obama's energy Blue Ribbon Commission for America's Nuclear Future. Today, we're going to be talking about the state of energy in Washington State. And I've asked him to save time for questions in the audience. We'll also take questions from viewers who are watching online as well. We'll try to triage those questions as we go. So I won't take any more of his time. I'll turn the floor over to him right now.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's see. Does this work? No, it doesn't. Okay, let's do this. I'm not having any success with this. I'm a scientist.
Yep. Hang on. Let's do it. There.
Okay, good. But I like that, yeah.
Yeah, there. Now it'll work.
Oh, no.
There.
Oh, good. Anyway, I like these nighttime NASA shots because you can tell right away who has energy and who doesn't. Okay, it's what the fighting's always been about, what it always will be about. Right now, our species is generating 27 trillion kilowatt hours a year of electricity. It will soon go to 40 trillion, and we'll talk about why that's the case. Now, if you look at distribution by type in the world, it's 2/3 fossil fuel. 2/3 fossil fuel, and the other third, pretty much almost equal amounts of nuclear and hydro. Of course, it depends really on where you live. So in the United States, still 2/3 fossil fuel, but a little bit more gas than coal now. Those numbers were completely switched 20 years ago. We've been replacing coal with gas. Hydro has been always significant. Wind's coming up, solar's coming up, other. But even within the United States, it's very different where you live. Washington State has the least carbon footprint for its energy production. Because we have so much hydro, we're one nice nuclear plant over where I live. West Virginia, of course, is mostly coal. Illinois is mostly over 50% nuclear, which is, I mean, Obama loved nuclear. He just wasn't allowed to talk about it. European Union, a little bit more nuclear because of France. And then, Korea doesn't look like much. It's, almost 30% nuclear, but their plan is to be 60% nuclear by 2050 because they have no resources. They have no fossil fuel to speak of. Their wind resources are crap. Their solar resources are lousy. They don't have enough biomass to even feed themselves. So unless you want to be completely dependent on countries like Russia and China and the United States for your energy source, you better go nuclear. And that's what Japan was also planning to do before Fukushima. Finally, they've recovered from their ridiculousness and are firing them up again. China doesn't look like much, except that they're breaking ground on a new nuclear power plant every month. Every month. And they're hooking one up to the grid every month. Their last 5-year plan, and they stick to their 5-year plans. We don't even have a plan, but they have a plan, and it is to build 180 nukes by 2035, and they're on track. Okay, and they're building the small modular ones that they kind of stole our design, but that's okay. They stole the safety stuff too, so I don't really care about that. But they're building them. They're building them at half the cost and half the time than we are because they don't start, stop, which doubles your cost and doubles your time. So we have a problem with subcontracting and stuff like that for this kind of thing. If you're building the Golden Gate Bridge, you need to start and finish. You don't go halfway in and stop for 3 years. I mean, you don't do that. We used to be able to build things like this. We're kind of hard now. Anyway, I won't be talking much about transportation, but it's dominated by petroleum. And it will be until we get enough hydrogen and enough electric vehicles on the road. It's pretty much the only way to do it. They're not coupled now, but they need to be coupled, especially if we go to huge amounts of electric vehicles. We're going to need more electricity. right? A significant amount. And that has to be factored in. So this is the world power consumption growth curve. It's very steep, has nothing to do with us. We're last century. This is everyone else now. And as I said, presently we're 27 trillion kilowatt hours. So and presently we're 2/3 fossil fuel. This is for the world. So in order to get to 40, we're going to have to come up with more non-fossil fuel sources than we have fossil fuel now. And if we want to replace any of the fossil fuel, we're going to have to come up with twice as much electricity from non-fossil fuel as we get from fossil fuel now. These are big numbers. You got to remember these numbers because they're big and they matter. And who cares about percentage? 50% of zero is still zero. Okay, so it's not another percentage. You want to know the absolute number of kilowatt hours produced, because that's what you have to get to. Now, the reason that curve is so steep is because of these people. Over 1 billion people still have no access to electricity whatsoever. 2.4 billion people still burn wood manure as their main source of energy, and 3 billion people are on the way. Okay, now it turns out the only way to eradicate global poverty is to give everyone at least 3,000 kilowatt hours per person per year. That will lift someone up out of poverty. We've known this for 1,000 years. And you can do the calculation. I love the calculation for students. 17th century nobleman was getting an equivalent of 3,100 kilowatt hours a year off the backs of 10 slaves, 10 indentured servants, 4 oxen, and 4 horses. It's a great calculation. Everyone here is getting about 10,000 kilowatt hours a year off the back mainly of hydro and a little bit of nuclear and wind. So, this is not new. We've known this for quite some time. Okay, so that's key here. This is very key, because if you're going to ask someone to sacrifice their family for the planet, they're not gonna. Okay, they're just not gonna. We're not hardwired that way. Okay, probably for a good reason. So we need to deal with eradicating global poverty and the amount of energy that's going to take with saving the planet. And those are really difficult things to solve simultaneously. All right, now I encourage you to visit the United Nations Human Development Index. It's a great site. Access to energy turns out to be the first term in the equation of happiness, period. And I'm not kidding, it is. And it doesn't matter whether you're a 17th century nobleman or someone present day. If you are down in, let me back up a little bit. This is annual electricity use or equivalent energy use. And this is, Human Development Index, meaning 0 is absolute hell and 1 is absolute heaven. Okay. Now, it's no wonder that these people up here, these countries, people want to get there. They want to leave here and get there. No duh. Okay. It's not surprising. It's not a secret. Okay. So we have to get everyone up there and get everyone down there for the minimum amount of energy to eradicate global poverty, its evil stepchildren, war, and terrorism. So this is not easy. Okay. Now, whenever we talk about energy in America, or I'm sorry, in the civilized world, bad choice of word, developed world, we talk about moving us down there. Fine, great. Japan in 1992 was over here. And strictly through technology and policy, they've come down, screaming down, and they will, continue to come screaming down. Now, I use California as its own country. Love California. But half of it is very warm and very nice, okay? Canada is big and cold. You will never bring Canada down at all, but that's okay. There's only not that many people there. So it doesn't affect the globe as a whole, not like China or India or the United States. Now, China's weird. Okay, so if access to energy is the first term in the equation of happiness, the second term is form of government, right? So these countries have plenty of energy, but they don't distribute them equitably, all right? And so they're off this curve. China's off this curve, not because they don't do a good job of that, but because there are 2 populations in China now. There's 800 million middle-class Chinese. That's incredible. But there's still 600 million in poverty, and all of their policies, whether it's economic, political, military, doesn't matter, is geared to lifting these people up there. Now, Your economic and military power derive specifically from the absolute number of middle class in your society, not the relative amount, not the percentage, the number. So when Britain in 1850 figured out how to coke steel with coal, started building battleships that were made of steel and not wood, how do you think that went over? It's pretty good. Took them 20 years to get the infrastructure in place, but they dominated the world. And that's why the sun never set on the British Empire, because of coal and steel. Okay, now we followed about the turn of the century, we discovered oil, and the Brits hated oil because they had a lot of coal, but not much oil at that time. We had tons of oil. And so now in World War I, our battleships made of steel were being run on oil-fired reactors, burners, and they were still using coal. We could run rings around them. And then, then we came in with gas and hydro in the 30s. And so by 1950, we had 100 million middle-class Americans. I'm sorry, I should say by 1870, Britain had 10 million middle class. It was the first middle class on earth. There's always been a peasant, a merchant class, whatever, but there's never been a middle class where you didn't have to own anyone to get 3,100 kilowatt hours a year. You had to burn coal. Messy, dirty. Dickens wrote a lot about it. But yeah, by 1870, they had 10 million middle class, and they dominated the world. 1950, we had 100 million middle class. 1970, we had 200 million middle class. Dominated the world. Now, the Cultural Revolution in China held them back 30 years, and gave us a good head start. Otherwise, they would have been matched us a lot earlier. But by 1990, the vestiges of the pull-up bar had gone by 1992, and China had kind of gone away, and the Chinese pull-up bar was 80% scientists and engineers. Now think of our Congress, 80% scientists and engineers. We'd have different outcomes. And this is not anything, this is no secret. Okay, so they said the first 5-year plan was 600 coal-fired power plants by 2010. And they did. And suddenly, wow, they have a lot of middle class. So by mid-century, they're going to have over 1 billion middle class. Who is going to dominate the economic and military power of the second half of this century? Shout it out. China. Usually when I ask questions like that, the two answers are China or $1 trillion, one of those two. Okay, so to think about this, a lot of people down here spend 6 hours a day getting water. 6 hours a day. You need a little pump, a little electricity, PVC piping, and you could free up a lot. That's what this is about. You have energy to do things that you shouldn't be spending your entire life doing, like getting water, or filtering it, or cleaning it. Okay, now, there is a sweet spot. If we get everyone up there, everyone down there, that's the minimum amount of energy we need to have what we consider an equitable world. Now, it doesn't mean everyone is going to have a great life. It just means you have an opportunity to have a great life. Not everyone here has a great life, but you have the opportunity to have a great life. All right, it's a little different, but important. Of course, there are two different strategies. We talk about, LEDs and compact fluorescents and that they don't have lamps to put those in. All right, so it's a completely different strategy. And if you don't have two different strategies, you're going to fail, and that's why we've been failing. So how much energy does that mean we need to make? Well, in the industrialized world, cut us down to 6,000 kicking and screaming. No one likes to give up anything. But there's only 1 billion people in that subgroup. There's a lot of people at 3,000. Okay, keep them there. Developing world. Here we are. 5 million and 3.5 million people you have to get up to 3,000 kilowatt hours per person per year. And that will take at least 34 trillion kilowatt hours. And that's only if you equitably distribute it. And since we don't do that, in general, it's going to be over 40, at least. Okay, so what are the fastest growing energy sources in the world? Shout them out. Just shout it out. I wish. Shout it out. Well, it's a trick question because I didn't say electricity. I said energy. No, oil. Oil is it. Oil's king. We'll continue. Then coal, then natural gas. This is not the direction we want, okay?
What year is that in? 2020 or?
Actually, it's a little before 2020, but the extrapolation holds. I just haven't graphed it again. But yeah, so when everyone talks about this is the non-fossil fuel, and I know renewables are screaming up there. I get it, they're screaming up there, okay? And by 2080, there might be a significant part of the mix, but you're not going to replace these with these if you eliminate one of them or two of them. If you say, I don't like solar, I don't like nuclear, I don't like wind, whatever, you can't do that. We don't have the luxury of that, all right? Because this is kind of critical and kind of crucial. We have a time problem here. And these are growing too slowly. You need to quadruple these in order to make any dent in these. Because if you add these together, you're up here. Add these together, you're still down here. Okay, Washington State, our biggest carbon footprint is transportation. We've done really well in lowering the energy consumption because we have so much hydro. Okay, and we have this great nuclear plant. So that's pretty low. Okay, and in fact, coal is going to go away soon. We're going to close our last coal plant, 2025 in Centralia. And industrial, we've actually cut that down too. Waste and ag, we have dramatically cut down our footprints. It's just really transportation. And that's going to take either EVs and then hydrogen, but it's EVs. Okay, now we have a problem. This is the Pacific Northwest grid. I know it includes Utah. I don't know why. We're interconnected. Okay, so right now we face a 7 gigawatt shortfall in capacity for this region. That's the output of 2 Grand Coulee dams. This is not insignificant. Okay. By 2030, it's going to grow to 10. All right. Now, if you talk to Bonneville Power in administration, which is the biggest regional transmission operator in this region, the last 2 years, we have had some pretty extreme weather, some cold, some hot, and they said we were one Lower Snake River Dam away from rolling blackouts. So when you talk about taking down the Snake River dams, you better be replacing it with something. I would small mountain reactor, that's my choice, but you better replace it with something because we don't have enough energy. For similar reasons, California, Texas are having rolling blackouts during extreme weather because they have installed so much renewables and backing it up with gas. And sometimes you don't have enough gas because you don't have enough pipelines or equipment fails or something. And then they have rolling blackouts. And the one that Texas had, was it 2 years ago? Yeah, about 2 years ago. It killed 130 people and cost $3 billion. I mean, that's not trivial. They've gotten better. They've gotten better.
And just last week, we came very close.
Yeah, we came very close. Yeah.
Because of, again, very.
Right. Yeah. So again, the grid is tricky, and we'll talk about that. So as this is the 2019 Integrated Resource Plan, which we do every few years. And so it's, okay, we're going to close these coal plants, and we have been closing them. We're actually, this one is on, the second unit's going to close next year. We're actually on board to closing these coal plants, okay? And another 6,000 megawatts of coal retirements in Utah, okay? And again, this is equivalent to about 3 Grand Coulee Dam outputs, okay? And we're going to close it, we're going to shut those down. What are we replacing them with? Nothing. We're not replacing with at all. We're just, we close, reduce the carbon footprint, reduce it. You got to have a plan to replace it. And wind doesn't work that well in the Pacific Northwest because it only displaces hydro. So every time the wind comes on, we dump hydro, which is not really good. It doesn't help you in terms of climate because you're not actually saving any carbon. Okay, it's one renewable replacing another. So that's kind of weird. So in the 2019 Integrated Resource Plan, they predicted that the outage, rolling blackouts, the outage risk that has always been less than 5%, that's why we never have rolling blackouts here, is going to rise to 26%, which means you will have rolling blackouts during extreme weather. It's not 26% chance. No, it means you will have rolling blackouts during extreme weather. And of course, that got Olympia very upset. So they said, redo that. Okay, well, I'm going to redo that. So the 2023 Integrated Resource Plan backed off on that a bit and said, well, we're going to delay or defer some of these coal closings. We're going to build some new gas and we'll be okay. Well, yeah, but you're not going to meet your CETA goals. I mean, so you've replaced reliability with CETA, with failing CETA. Not good. This is not what I would call a plan. Okay, so what you have to do is get rid of these, bring all of these up. Get rid of these, bring all these up. We don't have a luxury of saying, I don't like wind, I don't like nuclear, I don't like, that's stupid. We don't have the luxury of that. You need to bring them all up, then you can tailor them however way you want. But you got to get rid of these. We don't have a lot of time to get rid of those. And you're going to just bring these up. Now, the funny thing is that recently, the UN Economic Commission for Europe and the IPCC came out with a new calculations for life cycle footprints, carbon and otherwise. And it turns out nuclear is the lowest. And this is life cycle. This is mining and enriching and everything else. Building concrete is the biggest source of CO2 in building hydro and nuclear. It's just, whereas a gas plant you could throw up in a year with nothing, it doesn't take anything. So that's the lowest one, but they're all low. I mean, they're all low, okay? And then there's a whole bunch of other things, that they found, and us in the nuclear industry have known this forever, but it's nice to see it talked about. Sorry, busy slide. So this is life cycle impacts on human health. It includes ionizing radiation. So what you get more of if you live next to gas plants and coal plants, you do live next to a nuclear plant. You know that, right? Yeah. Because no one cares about that in coal and gas. So anyway, so here's fossil fuel bad, and all this stuff is good. So now it turns out nuclear is better, but I just like that because I'm a nuclear guy. But they're all good, right? Same thing with life cycle impact on ecosystems from any perspective. Nuclear is the best. Bad, good, bad, good. Nuclear just happens to be better. Now, the thing about the grid is that you have to simultaneously produce, deliver, and consume the same amount of energy 10 seconds by 10 seconds. If you produce more than you consume, you start blowing transformers and starting fires. If you consume more than you produce, you start having weather blackout. So if you've ever been to these regional transmission offices, the technology is amazing. There's people just sitting, watching things. Something goes down, boom, flick up that, flick up that. You have to balance this. And that's what renewables have a hard time doing because you cannot predict them. It's solar you can kind of, but wind you can't. Wind comes up, starts blowing. You can have a little bit of weather forecast, but you got to be ready to fire up something when the wind stops, and you have to be ready to dump something when the wind comes on. It's just all those two. That's why the utilities hate renewables because it's a lot harder to deal with. So this is it's called a load map. This is from Bonneville Power Administration, and pretty much it shows what goes on over a week, hour by hour. So the gray line is the load. That's what we're taking off the grid. Okay, the light blue is hydro, and you notice, hey, it completely follows the grid. I mean, we use hydro to balance the grid. Most other states use natural gas. Now, the funny thing, and here's fossil biomass, and here's the nuclear plant. So, they just produce. It's called base load. You just produce. You never vary those. It doesn't make any sense to vary those. You don't get anything by ramping them down. And you can just dump water over the top of the dam and not produce electricity with it. So when wind comes on, we dump hydro. That's all we do. And wind goes away, hydro goes back up. Now this double hump is the morning everyone wakes up, starts firing up their coffee machines, go to work, take lunch, go back to work, come back home. That is the daily double hump. Now, Sundays and Saturdays are a bit lower, but this is normal. And here is another one. So the load here is in red, blue is hydro, the brown is fossil fuel, and the green is wind. So here, nothing, but boom. And that was such a high amount of energy produced that you had to dump a lot of hydro. And this is called negative pricing because you can't sell it. Okay. And economics is important. If you can't sell, if you can't make a profit, and this is America, you got to make a buck. I get that. But if you don't make enough money, you're not going to operate that plant. You're going to say, forget this, I'm out of here. And so we often pay producers not to produce, just like we used to pay farmers not to grow crops. Not a good model. Okay, so capacity, everyone know what capacity factor is? Okay, some do. Good. Some don't, even better. So what this is, I actually have it. Capacity factor is the annual average percent of what the unit's supposed to produce versus what it does produce, right? So if you had a 1,000 megawatt wind turbine farm and it was just putting out, the wind was blowing 24/7 for a year at 35 miles an hour, you would get 1,000 megawatts. But it doesn't do that. In fact, it only produces about 34%, 35% of the time. And solar is even worse. Now, these are national averages, but it varies from state to state. Okay, so in Eastern Washington, in Washington State, it's only 27%. That's all we ever get out of our wind turbines. But if you're in Tornado Alley, notice the name, Tornado Alley, you can get up close to 50%. That's why most wind turbines in America are in Tornado Alley, and they should be, because that's where you get the most bang for your buck, because it takes a lot of neodymium and steel and cement to build wind turbines. So you want to get twice as much energy out of it than in Washington State. I mean, it's just dumb to build wind in Washington State. It's insane, but it's lucrative. So when you're comparing different energy sources, then you have to compare apples to apples, and no one ever does. Okay, so let's just do that. So look at a 1,000 megawatt nuclear plant, which is similar to the one where I live. Capacity factor 0.935, 8766 hours in a year. That's what it produces. 8 billion kilowatt hours, sometimes 9 billion kilowatt hours every year. Doesn't vary. You can depend on that. Okay, then wind farm, 1,000 megawatts, wind farm, 0.27 now times 8766. So it produces about a little over 2 million megawatt hours a year. So are you going to compare 1,000 megawatts to 1,000 megawatts? No, you're going to have to compare 1,000 megawatts to 4,000 megawatts. And the cost of 4,000 megawatt wind turbine is a lot different than 1,000 megawatts. And people do not correct for this. Very, very important. It gets worse. So the lifespan of a nuclear plant is 80 years, not 40. You hear 40 years? That was an arbitrary number picked out of the air by Atomic Energy Commission in 1957. When should we relook at this? 40 years. Fine, good. And then we'll do it again every 20 years. But the design life is 80 years, just like the design life of Grand Coulee Dam is 150 years. All right? So, and the design life of wind turbines is 20 years. I'll be generous and give it 25. That's fine. So over the lifespan of these units, you get 10 times as much. So now you have to install 10,000 megawatts of wind to equal 1,000 megawatts of nuclear. And then the price gets really different. And the cost comparisons get really different. And you can do that with all of these. So according to the latest resource adequacy study, the effective load carrying capacity. Okay, so you have the capacity factor. That's just an average. But what's the capacity factor when you need the energy? When it's really cold or really hot. And it turns out for wind, that's only 7%, not 24%, not 50%. It's only 5%, or 7%. And because when it's really cold and really hot, wind does not blow. That's just the way it is. So our 7,100 megawatts of wind only produce 500 megawatts when times are tough, when you need it, when you need the energy, because it's really cold or really hot. So you see the pattern here, right? Okay, now materials. It matters where you put these things because of the material cost. So wind takes the most steel and the most concrete. So you got to normalize, So you say, okay, we're going to pick 556,000 megawatt hours. So what is it going to take for each of these energy sources to produce that over their life, right? And so, okay, well, it takes, this is mass of concrete and mass of steel and millions of metric tons. Yeah, well, wind is way out here. It takes a lot of concrete, a lot of steel, and it's not even including copper and neodymium. But, you know, these are kind of proxies for that. Solar is a lot better, about half in each category. Hydro doesn't take much steel, but a lot of concrete. Gas almost takes nothing, and nuclear almost takes nothing, because it produces so much energy per mass of concrete or steel used to build it. Because it runs for 80 years and it runs 99% of the time, or 95% of the time. So where would you put wind farms? Just a guess. Okay. Yeah, you put them here. You don't build wind farms in Georgia. That would be dumb. So, and you don't build them on the west side of Washington State. That would be dumb. Okay, so yeah, so again, this should be filled with wind turbines. And that's okay, because a lot of this is farmland, farmers get paid for that, that's great, love it. Okay. Solar. Should you be building solar in Seattle? No, because that would be dumb. You don't build it in Maine either. Okay, you build it in the Southwest United States where you get 10 times the amount of energy. I have solar panels on my roof. My late wife said, you know, you need street cred in renewables, so put some solar panels on this. Okay, I mean, it's kind of funny, but my capacity factor is 10%. We're at 47 degrees north latitude. Come on. So this is where you want to put solar. This is where you want to put wind. You want to put nuclear at every coal plant site because it's sited correctly. You can a nuclear plant can use 80% of the workforce of a coal plant. No retraining needed, and it can use 50% of the infrastructure that's already there. So that's why Bill Gates is putting his new nuclear design at a coal plant in Wyoming. Should be done by about 2032. Now, hydro is interesting. So we could double hydro in this country without building a single new dam. This is the lowest hanging fruit. We have a lot of dams. We have 80,000 dams, and only 3% of them are powered. The big ones, of course. But you can find ones that are decent sized. Don't need to build a new dam. You just need to power it, which is a lot easier. People living around it are used to it. You know, it's already done whatever environmental damage it's going to do. But you could double hydro. And this is the plan that DOE and the National Hydro Association has. Okay, so hydro makes Pacific Northwest energy rich, but wind makes the Pacific Northwest capacity poor. All right? So I've drilled capacity into you now. You understand capacity. All right, this is where grid scale storage is desperately needed. And grid scale storage, grid scale battery, expensive, don't have it, don't have enough lithium. Maybe we will in the future, that's fine. We have new technologies, that's fine. So by the end of the century, we're going to be fine. But by 2040, 2050 is where we actually have to do this. And so, okay, that's okay. We'll work on that, keep working on that. Then there's gravitational potential energy. That's, you know, pumped hydro. You lift something up high, about 300 feet, and using wind and solar when it's available, and then you store it there and you let it back out. It's like dropping a brick, you know, potential energy, and then you drop it and you get the kinetic energy out of it. So, okay, pumped hydro is 97% of global storage. Pumped hydro. Most people don't know what pumped hydro is. Every time we propose pumped hydro, what do you think happens? Everyone votes it down. What? It's the best thing. Now there's other potential energy sources. There's a pumped train, which is filled with rocks. And it's electric train, and you use wind energy to put it up 300 feet. And when you need it, you let it out. And it's 90% effective. It's really quite, it's as good as lithium. Yeah, it's very cool. They're building one near Vegas because it doesn't take water. So usually though, we got water and we have lots of water in the gorge, whatever. We need about 5 of these. So again, you have a lower reservoir, you have an upper reservoir, about 300 feet up, which the Horseheaven Hills, perfect. And so you just pump it up using renewables when they're available. You hold them there and you let it back out and it drives a little hydroelectric generator. Absolutely perfect. And here's one that was put in 1958 in Germany, and now it load follows a 132 megawatt wind farm. Maintenance is low, not very big. I mean, this is really easy stuff. And we've been doing this forever. Now, here's the gravitational potential energy, the lifting. If you're in a desert and you don't have any water, because they're building one of these in Saudi Arabia. So you have 35-ton bricks, and they're green bricks, which is interesting. They're not cement, they're made of chopped up wind turbine blades. I love it, very cool. So you lift these 35-ton bricks up and hold them there, and when you need them, you let them out. It's really quite simple. Very nice. Now, we have proposed such a thing near John Day Dam, right? And be perfect for it. It's the only way to make our 7,100 megawatts of wind useful, okay, and not just displace hydro. Right. So we propose this. So this is on ceded tribal land. You'd figure you'd go talk to the tribes, right? No, let's go to Olympia. Get the buyout from FSEC, and the office is there. Then you propose this, and of course the tribes are going to say no, because you didn't invite. And this is 2024. Okay, we should be beyond that nonsense. Okay, you need to get everyone to the table, and since you're going to put it on tribal land, you need to get the tribes to buy off on it. Or even better, where should you put this? Where would you like us to put this? That's what I would do. And again, it's the same kind of thing. You have a lower reservoir. In this case, it's basically filled by Columbia River water. It doesn't take much water. It doesn't lose much water over time. And you basically just pump it back and forth. Now we have 2 others proposed near Grand Coulee and in Klickitat County, and the same kind of thing. It's opposed because it wasn't presented correctly. Now, every leading climate scientist from Jim Hansen on down says we cannot decarbonize without a significant amount of nuclear, period. We've done the math. Everyone's done the math. Okay, this nonsense that you can get away without hydro or without nuclear is nonsense. And so, okay, that's great. Now, we have not been idle in the last 30 years. We have some very nice small modular reactors. And the reason small modular is good because you can tailor it to the site, to what you need. You can turn it on and off like a light switch, so it's great for load following renewables, and they cannot melt down. Cannot melt down. Now, there are 3 that are of use or that involve the Pacific Northwest. Bill Gates has a nuclear company in Bellevue. You've probably heard of that. Very cool. He kind of picked $50 million out of his pocket in 5 minutes. Oh, God. Okay. So, and X Energy, the Pebble Bed reactor, China stole the design and built 2 of them, hooked them up to the grid. Really good. I'm glad they sold the safety stuff too, so not worried about that. But they showed it can be done. Because a lot of people say, oh, these are all on paper. First of all, none of these are on paper. We built these as test reactors 50 years ago, and China's building them now. So whatever. And then NuScale out of Corvallis. So these are great, can't melt down. So this is Bill Gates's design. This is the pebble bed reactor design. The pebbles are made of refractory materials that cannot melt at any conceivable temperature in this reactor. So and it's like a little gumball machine. You kind of put these things on top, they kind of travel through, you take them at the bottom, you test them, is there enough energy, put it back on top. Very cute. Does not take water to cool. Does not take water. Helium. And this one too. So this is a NuScale out of Oregon. It takes water generally, but you can air cool it. It just costs 5% of your capacity. But it's worth it if you're in a desert. Okay, how do we achieve a low carbon future for Washington State? Oh, Yeah, and renewables. So you got to stop building fossil fuel plants. I mean, you just got to stop, okay? You're not going to decarbonize, you keep building new plants. So, okay, so that goes to zero. Hydro goes down a little bit. Nuclear, you can double that with one small modular reactor. You can double nuclear in the state. Okay, put it right next to the other reactor. Fine. And renewables, you could triple renewables. Okay. Now, in 2022, we've generated 92 terawatt hours. By 2035, we're going to have to go up to 115 because we're going to have significant number of EVs as well, which themselves will take 7 terawatt hours to charge. And then, you know, we're doing heat pumps and all that kind of stuff. So our load is going to grow, no question about that. Data centers take 200 megawatts apiece, 200 megawatts. So this mix will cost the state $200 billion, which sounds like a lot, but it's really not. And $100 billion of that is capital. For America, you want this kind of mix, it's going to cost you $9 trillion, which sounds like a lot, but isn't, because business as usual is going to cost $9 trillion. All right. The difference is capital. Business as usual, you're paying for fuel that goes up the stacks. For non-fossil fuel, you're building things. And so your capital is much higher, and that's upfront. So you're asking the public to say, okay, fork up the money up front, you'll make it back later. Yeah, right. So they don't like that. No one likes that. No one trusts that. But it's the only way you can do it. And the world, it's going to cost 68 trillion. Who's going to pay for that? China, European Union, and us. We're the only ones that have any money. So if you wanted this done, you're going to have to do it. Okay, cost. I don't know if I have time here. So the big question is the various energy sources, the cost difference, sufficient to justify unethical decisions? I know you're going to make a buck, but you have to make that much bucks, right? So this is, it turns out energy is the cheapest now that it's ever been in the history of humanity. This is an interesting calculation by King at UT Austin. And so, okay, this is mainly muscle power, horses, oxen, whatever. And then coal comes in and boom, becomes really cheap. And this is percentage of GDP. And here's the 1973 oil embargo. It even shows up there. And since food goes with fuel, even though I know it costs more at the supermarket now, but in general, as part of your GDP, food is the cheapest now it's ever been. And so this is the cost, the levelized cost that people use, state legislatures use, everyone uses. And okay, yeah, coal's more expensive, hydro's more expensive, but these are all within 1 penny of each other. And is 1 penny a kilowatt hour too much to spend to save the world? Really? No, it's not. And these are not even correct, actually, because they have not been normalized correctly. So this is what it actually turns out to be. Existing hydro is the cheapest. So the idea of closing down hydroelectric plants, you got to think carefully about that. Right? And that's okay, but you got to think carefully. Existing nuclear, the next cheapest, new gas. And if you're going to do net zero, which is a joke, but okay, we'll pretend we can do that. It's going to be a little more expensive. New nuclear is 6.9 cents, new wind and new solar, and this includes the subsidies. That's what they cost, because there's a whole bunch of indirect costs that are not included in direct costs and levelized. And remember, taxpayer subsidies do not reduce the cost. They just shift the cost from the ratepayer to the taxpayer. And since we don't know where our taxes go anyway, it kind of gets lost in the shuffle. But someone's going to pay for it, right? It's not free. Okay, now, this is the last thing, sorry. Right, right. But this is cool. No, we got to do this. Anyone have any questions, burning questions? They can't wait till this is done. Oh, that's right. Right. I hope it's making energy at least. So this is, the indirect costs. We don't know the indirect costs. So there's the physical footprint. This is one area, one little square is a square mile to produce 1 billion kilowatt hours a year. And okay, yeah, it's renewables all about space, right? Nuclear is neither. And the CO2 footprint, of course, fossil fuel is all about the carbon, right? And again, nuclear is nothing. Now, what about the death print? All right, well, coal kills so many people, you got to push it off to the side. It just kills so many people. right? Now gas is not bad. I mean, this is 10 times that. This is for the world, hydro, well, it's not bad. And then these are all just accidents, literally people falling off of ladders, scaffolding, breaking their necks and dying. I mean, this is all accidents, right? Now that's kind of funny. So if you look at the numbers here, coal on average kills 100,000 people per terawatt hour produced, per terawatt hour. And then I have three numbers here, global average, China's getting better, used to be 250,000 a few years ago. And coal, I mean, we only kill 10,000 people a year in the United States. That's pretty good. No, it's not. I don't like that. And now, then you get down here, and again, these are all just accidents. All right. Now, why is the US so low?
Safety regulations?
Yes, regulation. So arguably, and I've been in arguments with labor on this, the single piece of legislation that has saved the most lives in history has been the Clean Air Act. And that's why they don't have Clean Air Acts. All right. What about this? I mean, the Bankyo dam failure in 1976, I think it was, in China. Yeah, killed, ended up killing 171,000 people. Oops. So, but we don't do that. This person fell off scaffolding and broke his neck. That's it. Why? Because we have FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and they inspect dams. And they will shut you down. If they have a crack in the cement, you will fix this, or you will never open up again, start up again. Some countries simply let the dam fail, wipes out villages. Okay. And then nuclear, I even included ridiculous numbers for Chernobyl. No one died at Fukushima. 56 people died from radiation at Chernobyl. 56, horrible, but that's it, not thousands. So we have NRC, the NRC. NRC would never have had never allowed Fukushima to start up in the first place. We'd been telling them your seawall is crap and your backup generation is in the wrong place. And they ignored us. So, okay. This is Beijing today. Beijing is 80% coal. And of course, this is cool, not my solution, but everyone gets very depressed if you never see the sky for weeks at a time. So they start putting up. Interesting. Okay, last thing. What do you think is the most dangerous on this? Let's just shout it out. Shout it out. That's top 4. I added that recently. It's a bummer, but it's. Yeah, smoking. Okay, hey, that's the bet. What the heck is iatrogenic? We have to worry about this because we're old. Okay, it is medicine gone wrong. It's not malpractice, not prescription drug abuse or anything like that. Properly taken, proper procedures, just don't know why the patient died. That is the second leading cause of behavioral death in America. And since I've had 6 surgeries in the last 10 years, I get worried about this. Food poisoning, really? We're killing that many people with hamburgers and lettuce? All right, so now, a biostatistician gave me grief recently. He said I hadn't normalized to the subpopulation. Okay, smoking still is the worst. But now, alcohol goes up. It depends on how many people engage in this behavior. All right. So mining, is only 360 people die a year, but I mean over a 5-year period. But there's not that many miners. So the relative danger index, it's not a true risk factor, but it's a relative danger index. It's nice to see that eating is only slightly more dangerous than nuclear power. It is. Okay, and even non-fatal accidents, even non-fatal accidents, it's safer to work at a nuclear power plant than to sit at a desk trading stocks. Now, why is that? It's not more dangerous in an office building. It's just no one cares about safety in an office building. Okay, I had to take ladder training at Hanford. Do you use a ladder? Take ladder training. I had 2 qualified operators to operate a ladder. No one ever falls off a ladder at a nuclear facility. But in the 7th story of the AIG building in New York, someone's standing on a rolling chair hanging a picture. I mean, you know that, right? And they're going to break their arm, get support to OSHA. These are OSHA numbers. Now, pouring 500-ton molten ingots of steel, that's dangerous. So that's real. Yes, we can. Go ahead, go ahead. I'm taking your questions.
Repeat questions as I give them to you.
Yes.
One that came up several times, some version of it was, the qualification of storage and versus wind in Washington. And the fact that the dams, not just pump storage, represent a massive storage resource.
No, they do not. They do not.
Because
Because we call these run-of-the-river dams. They're not made, they're not allowed to store. Okay, they can store a little teeny bit, but they're not allowed to store because you have to maintain flow along the entire river. The river is, the question is, our big dams, aren't they pumped hydro essentially, right? Because they're storage, but they're not. Grand Coulee is the only storage dam along the system. The others are called run-of-the-river. And so you can store a little bit, but you cannot store much because you have to let water through for fish, for irrigation, for everything else. Yeah, to transportation. So you don't have the luxury of making these into storage dams. Whereas pumped hydro is purely storage. Next.
One was the hydrogen. Where does hydrogen fit in this equation at all? It hasn't been here yet.
Yeah, it's tough. Okay, where does hydrogen fit in? Well, hydrogen is actually a little expensive to make. Okay, because you basically split methane and you produce a lot of CO2. So in order to not do that, you have to split water, which takes a huge amount more energy than splitting methane. Now you can use biogas from landfills. That's a good source. And then you can cleave the hydrogens off of that and you're basically net zero on carbon, but it's tricky. We don't have the infrastructure yet. We will have the infrastructure. And what do you think is most efficient for making hydrogen? Nuclear, of course, because the higher temperature and especially the highest temperature on the pebble bed reactors, you can split water like crazy. As a byproduct, you're not even using more energy to do it. So that's why you want nuclear in that.
So a couple of online viewers seem to be getting the sense that you're into nuclear a little bit.
I'm into nuclear.
One question is, how about the fact that the build out of renewables around the world has outpaced nuclear? You pointed at this a little bit in that one.
Yes, right.
Steep curve, right? Build out of renewables outpacing nuclear by as much as, I don't know, several fold worldwide at rate, at least at lower cost and much faster deployment rates. Yes, storage is expensive, but to what extent do we have to take into consideration the much faster deployment rate? So
well, again, it depends, right? If you normalize, okay. Renewables are faster to deploy and easier to build. Yeah, one turbine is easier to build than one nuclear power plant. Okay, but now, like I was saying, you're going to build 10,000 of them. So when you normalize the output, they're not much faster at all. And you need backup and the backup costs, and that's not included in the cost. So right now, California has so much solar, right? That everything else has to ramp down during the daytime when the sun's up. And that's great. But there are 12 natural gas peaker plants, really dirty ones, expensive ones, that sit idle all day long waiting for the sun to go down. Who pays for that? And then they fire up when it gets dark. Who pays for that? That's not included in the solar cost, but it is solar cost. It's the only reason you have them. And you have to pay them to idle or they won't participate.
Okay, so we'll take a few questions.
Just to follow up on that, isn't that why California is going to mandate vehicle to grid so that at night the
Yeah,
vehicles can start to offset some of it?
so okay. Can you use electric vehicles as a big battery, basically? So, and yes, Shanghai does that actually. And so you come home and you plug in your electric vehicle and you type in when you want your electric vehicle full powered. I need it at 8 a.m. I need it at 7 a.m. And so all of this is called demand response. So all of the million electric vehicles in Shanghai are all one big battery. Okay, as long as you make each one truly, powered when you need it. And so they use that it's fantastic. That's absolutely brilliant. Okay. But it takes the infrastructure to do that. And it takes the EVs to do that.
Yeah. I was wondering, so out of all this information, who do you think needs to be listening to these people in cars? Like politicians, corporations?
People. Okay. People. Who needs to know this material the most, right? Everyone does, of course. And actually answering this, I'm sorry, it's my bad, we told you to be scared. This is why. We have to erase this, okay? Nuclear waste is a piece of cake. Nuclear waste is easy. We dispose of it in the one rock type we need. All of our nuclear waste would fit in one repository the size of a big landfill, and that's it. We know it. It's in New Mexico. We've been disposing of nuclear waste there. No one knows about that. It's mainly bomb waste, but everything can go there and should go there. We're just not allowed to do it politically. And it's cheap. Not a dime of taxpayer money is needed. It's already paid for. You put it in the right rock. Put it in the wrong rock, no. So that's, but who knows that?
I didn't see you take transmission loss anywhere in your considerations. How does transmission loss factor in?
Yeah, there is loss. Now, it turns out DC lines are the best, contrary to what we've grown up with. The longer the transmission line above like 400 kilometers, DC has the least loss and it costs the less than that. So it's kind of funny.
To follow on that, if I may, from an online question, said no mention was made of exporting or importing power to and from the Southwest. So that hits specifically on this long distance transmission piece, right?
Right.
Would you talk a little bit about how imports and exports into the Pacific Northwest help or hurt our
Yeah, I mean,
resource planning here?
we always import. Now, we used to import from those coal plants that are closing. We can't import those anymore. So now we go farther away to get the energy we need. And of course, California has the same problem. They want our hydro. Well, our hydro is always taken. I mean, it's already taken. So when we have excess, we sell it to them. But soon we're not going to have excess because we're losing capacity. And so in those coal plants, we used to go to them when we had a problem. Now we can't go to them. So now we're going to go south to California, who's going north for us. I mean, there's only so much energy we're producing. And only so much conservation get you, all right? Otherwise, you just have to produce energy.
And knowing what you know about the stricter regulations, the start-stop of development,
Yeah.
how would you anticipate a rollout having a realistic basis in comparison to emulating what's going on in China?
Right, yeah. So we're going to start building small modulars in the early 2030s. Once we build a few of them, you got to build a few of them, right? Else no one buys it. So we'll start out slow and then we'll ramp up slightly in the 2030s. In the 2040s, we can take off and build 100. Okay, but that's you're going to do it. If you wait too much longer, you're into the 50s and 60s and it doesn't matter anymore. So how fast can you build nuclear? That was the question. Yeah, this is a bummer. Okay, what's the cost of electricity in Washington State on into the future? Well, right now we're the cheapest almost in the world. Okay, we're 8 cents a kilowatt hour, which is incredible. In New York, it's like 19 cents a kilowatt hour. So, but we're ramping down things. We're losing capacity. We have to pay more to import now, and we're going to have to be building new lines and stuff like that. So it's going to cost, the cost will go up. And the more renewables you put in, the much higher the cost goes. Because you don't get any extra energy, you're just kind of moving things around. Right.
Is part of that because of the cost of power going up as much as it has in California, where then they start?
Partially, it's just that it's warmer there. I love San Diego. The cost of California are low because it's warm. That's the question.
Talked a lot about energy production, but we only touched on transmission.
Right.
That what is our transmission capacity and how much more do we need for the amount of energy that we're going to need in the future?
We are tapped out. Our transmission capacity is full. Okay, and that's why when something goes down, we have blackouts. And it doesn't have to go down much. Especially the transformers, these huge transformers that cost $4 million and take 2 years to build. They're failing at a rate 10 times they were failing 10 years ago. What's the cost of transmission? That's the question. So yeah, it just costs a lot and it's going to keep costing more because we don't have the infrastructure in place and we're not replacing them and they're failing at a faster rate because they're old. our infrastructure is incredibly old. We're still using oil pipelines built in 1903. It's like, wow, that's pretty cool. But-
Let me bring in one from.
Yes.
Online, and I know there's several others in the audience. A couple of people wanted to talk about the conservation as a resource a little bit more. One says 2 million electric water heaters in the Northwest. Every time we convert one to a heat pump water heater, we free up enough electricity to drive an electric car about 10,000 miles per year. So that's rough.
Right.
I haven't done that math, but how?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Changing the nature of technology to conserve energy. But I actually have seen that heat pumps actually take more electricity than normal. I mean, they're more, well, I shouldn't say that. Yeah, scratch that. Yeah. So, hot water heater, no, never mind. I lost that thought. Yeah, so conservation gets you so far, and that's great. And we've done a lot of it. Like I said, we've completely revamped ag. We've been, residential units. Windows are really high quality now. You can't buy crappy windows anymore. The whole bit. So we're doing that. That gets you so far. But then the population's increasing, data centers are coming in, high-tech ag facilities, they all take huge amounts of energy. Bitcoin, God, what a waste of energy. Yeah, Bitcoin is actually nasty in terms of the amount of energy it takes. It's incredible. And in Washington State, because we're tapped out, you are not allowed to build a facility that takes more than 10 megawatts unless you have that secure in a power purchase agreement. So we've lost a bunch of manufacturing because of that. We invite people to, oh, Washington is great. We got lots of hydropower. Yeah, well, it's all taken. And you're not allowed to build anymore unless you have that power into the future. And so we're turning away jobs because we don't have enough energy.
Take one more in here and then we'll wrap up for the online audience. But those of you who want to hang around, if you've got a little more time, Jim, you don't have.
I'm yours.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I have to leave by 6, but I'm yours.
So
So in an ideal, based on, everything we've learned about nuclear and how it seems to be, evidently superior in a lot of ways. In an ideal situation, given the state of the grid, and, loss of power from transmission, what would an ideal future look like in terms of, how
Right.
many facilities would be needed?
50%, 50. Okay. What does an ideal future look like? And I kind of did a little bit. Okay. Come on, Jim. What are you doing? Oh, well, actually, where was I? I had that. Okay. Yeah, this mix. So this is America. All right. So this is what you need. This is a good mix that the grid can support, that you have enough base load and all that kind of thing. Now, I don't have the storage stuff in there, but you need the pumped hydro and other storage in there too. But this is the generation you need.
I guess just,
Okay.
along those lines, because of the transmission and all of that, are you saying that we basically need to prioritize policy that localizes energy production?
That's good. Yes.
Like, we need a nuclear plant here that powers us,
Yeah.
right?
Now, if you're going to take down the dams and you're going to get rid of fossil fuel in the state, we'll probably need 3 small modular reactors to replace that. It's not that bad, actually.
I guess globally, is localizing those things a priority?
Yeah, and there's two sides to that. It's more resilient if you're local, right? Because things could go down and doesn't affect everyone, whatever. But there's a what do you call it? An economy of scale. Because big plants actually are better, okay, but they're big plants. And so they're not as flexible, put it that way.
All right, I think we're gonna wrap it up if we can, just for the online audience. I'd like to thank you, Jim, for doing this, and this
You're
is the
welcome.
neat microphone sharing moment that we're having here. And thank the foundation and for their partnership with this. Thank you, all of you online. I know I didn't get to all of your questions. Thank you all in the audience for being such an engaged and interactive audience. Those of you who want to stay around and wear this man down a little bit more while his patience still endures are welcome to do so. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week, maybe.